Hello, this is the Module 6 lecture video, Population Understanding of Climate Change. This is Module 6 for Sci 333E, Psychology of Disaster and Climate Change at the University of Maine at Augusta. Now this module will happen over the next 2 weeks. The due date for this module is midnight Sunday, December 11th, 2016. The drop-dead deadline for all of your late work for this semester is going to be Friday, December 16th. So that is our barrier and our goal, but everything should be done, I would say, Sunday, December 11th. In this module, we're going to have two topics that we cover. The first is beyond physical sciences, politics and worldview. This is starting to get into the cognition surrounding climate change. This is not our psychological impact, what climate change does to us, but rather this is how we conceive of climate change, how we think about it, how we make decisions about it. So all of that other memory and processing and knowledge and learning that goes along with our cognition within our psychology, this is what this chapter, or what this module is focused on. So, the readings for this first one, Politics and Worldview, include McCright and Dunlap, The Politicization of Climate Change and Polarization in the American Public's Views of Global Warming. And second, we have Weber and Stern, Public Understanding of Climate Change in the United States. Both great articles. I think you'll enjoy them. Our second topic is beyond the physical sciences, society and culture. And so really starting to look into those issues of our fundamental core identity of who we are as people and how we make decisions based on our shared humanity. First, we have Finucane. This is Melissa Finucane, Why Science Alone Won't Solve the Climate Crisis, Managing Climate Risks in the Pacific. One of my all-time favorite articles. I think you'll enjoy it. And then an article that I wrote, this is How to Connect with Us, Report from the Livelihood and Culture Breakout Session of the Pacific Island Climate Services Forum, which was a forum that I attended, and I got to go to the the livelihood and culture breakout session within this. And this is a reporting out of what we learned, what we discussed, and why culture and livelihood are such important things to consider when we are talking about what to do with climate change. This week we're reading a couple of articles about how sometimes the politics of climate change is not really about climate change, but is about politics, and why this is actually a very reasonable, if frustrating, response. Climate change in and of itself is not political. It has been noted by many people and many researchers that it has become very politicized. The McCright and Dunlap article, The Politicization of Climate Change and Polarization of the American Public's Views of Global Warming, 2001 to 2010, discusses the nature of this politicization, the hows and whys of climate change being political when it is a global climatological phenomenon. The article opens discussing the fact that you may or may not have heard before. Our country has not always been this polarized. This is a very recent phenomenon. We have always had arguments and struggles. We are a very revolutionary, uppity sort of nation. We have strong opinions and we share them with people who we disagree with entirely. This is not new. But the fact that these opinions on so many different topics divide along political party lines, that is very recent. This is a very past few decades sort of recent. There's been a lot of research on this polarization. For example, a state being a red state versus a blue state, that's new. Only the past few handful of election cycles new. The first 5 or 6 pages of this article gives an overview of this recent history, this few decades of politics across a variety of issues becoming much more red and blue and much less purple. So what exactly is causing this, and why has climate change gotten swept up in political polarization? Well, for one, we have the moderating influence of political worldview within our climate change beliefs. In statistical and theoretical terms, a moderating effect means that something is coming between, or it moderates, an issue and an outcome. In this case, we have climate change as an issue that we are presented with, and the outcome is our behavior or our beliefs about climate change. But in between those two is this political worldview. That is to say, I'm presented with information about climate change. As I am interpreting it and forming my beliefs on the topic based on this information that I've received, I'm interpreting it within my worldview, my life and my knowledge and my experiences and my opinions and my politics. If my political orientation is such that I believe if there is a problem, we as a society should fix it together, and that includes laws and governments, regulations, and whatever else that needs to happen in order to get the job done, my interpretation of this information about climate change is going to be moderated through my worldviews and create a belief system about climate change and the problem and how we need to solve it based on these moderating influences. If, on the other hand, I am presented with the same information about climate change, but my worldview says that the government should not be involved in regulations, that the free market economy is the best thing for our world, and if this climate change information includes the fact that pollution and industrialization actually cause climate change, and that working together as a society, perhaps including government regulation, is kind of the only way to solve this issue, well, that's going to create cognitive dissonance. That is going to completely upset and unbalance and unsettle my worldview, which is really not a place where people want to be. So what is exactly a reasonable response to this contention? Am I going to completely overhaul this moderating influence, which is my identity and my worldview about everything that I value as good and true in this world? Or am I going to minimize or deny the relevance or the importance or the truth of this information as I'm formulating my belief? So again, it's not just a matter of hearing and understanding information. We've been talking for weeks about how climate change touches every facet of society. So if accepting climate change and responding to it means a huge shift in someone's identity and worldview, well, you can expect that that change is going to take a long time. It's going to happen slowly, and there's going to be a lot of pushback. The good news is that it is happening. These articles are a little bit older, a few years old at this point. But right now, close to about 80% of the United States firmly believes that climate change exists and that it's caused by people. And so the debate is turning more toward where it actually needs to be, not whether or not it's happening, which is not actually a debate because that's just scientific fact. But the debate is where it ought to be, which is what should we do about it? That's another tough debate, and it's going to take a lot of pushing, and we're going to keep pushing, and we'll get there. The Weber and Stern article, Public Understanding of Climate Change in the United States, gets more into the actual cognition of how we think about climate change. So for example, this article discusses about climate literacy, or like the actual knowledge of climate change, but specifically the difficulty that people have in understanding such a complex issue. I am not saying that people are not capable of understanding climate change. That is far from the case. But we understand the world, we understand our life, for example, oftentimes from our personal experiences. It makes sense that we would catalog and understand the world from our experiences within the world, but climate change is slow and it's global. It's not every day in my backyard. It's not in the way of me completing my job or interrupting my drive home from school. When you think about the scale of a 500-year storm becoming a 100-year storm, that's a huge shift. But am I ever going to actually see it within my lifetime? I don't know, it's huge, and so the scale and the scope is very different from what we are used to thinking about things in the world, and so that requires a cognitive shift in our understanding and how we understand things. We can also think about, or we also, human people, often think about things in terms of what has happened recently. So, for example, the past couple of winters in Maine have had some really bad storms. And so I've heard a lot of people talking about how the winters are getting worse. But I've also talked to people about winters from their childhoods, decades ago, and how these kind of storms used to be normal. I saw this in the Pacific too, places that used to have a monsoon season or that usually have a monsoon season. Really heavy rains and floodings as this kind of systematic, regular thing that happens every year during a particular season. But then they've been going through extended droughts, years and years of much less rainfall. And so when the regular rains, these very heavy rains, start to come back, oh golly, it's never been this bad before. But in fact, it has been this bad before. In fact, this used to be normal. We get used to what has happened in the past few years as the normal. And so as things get progressively worse, we get used to that, and then we don't notice until it starts shifting back. This article also talks about a number of other value and worldview issues, for example, that we saw in the McCright and Dunlap article. But it closes with this very important question: what do we do? And of course, the ever important question, what is the role of psychology in all of this? So these are really great articles. Have fun. It's interesting to kind of think about how our worldview plays into all of this understanding of climate change. All of our discussions this semester have centered on the psychology of disasters and climate change, reconceptualizing these issues as not just physical science issues, not just emergency management issues, not just urban planning issues, but human issues, psychological issues. But within all of our discussions about how this is a relatively new field, we missed one piece, which is that this isn't actually new, if you know where to look. The first article by Melissa Finucane is Why Science Alone Won't Solve the Climate Crisis. This is one of my favorite human dimensions of climate change articles ever, because it cuts right to the heart of why this is a people issue. We absolutely need sound science. It is essential. But on its own, it is insufficient. We could have the best science in the world, but if we don't cater it to people who need to use it, it's no better than handing someone a parachute as they're falling out of a plane, only they don't know what a parachute is. It's useful, but only if you know how to use it. People have a lot of different ways that we interact with the world around us, and our scientific fields, especially the climate change fields, are evolving to recognize this. More and more, we're seeing social scientists working on interdisciplinary teams to help put this science to use. And that's where we are today. Class, welcome to the field. It's new for our scientific fields to be integrating human knowledge, but humans have always used their knowledge, and we have so much of it. We have tens of thousands of years of knowledge that has been applied in communities and that is still being applied in communities. It's a challenge to figure out how to bring our newer scientific methods together with this old knowledge, but it's a challenge worth facing. I had the honor and the privilege of attending the Pacific Islands Climate Services Forum in Fiji in 2013. I sat in and served as a rapporteur, note taker, in the livelihoods and culture breakout sessions, which was a series of very intense discussions about exactly this topic. And that's what this third article is about, my report back from these sessions, how to connect with us. We talked about the logistics of that big question. How do we use Western science? How do we apply it in communities that don't think from that viewpoint? How do we make it sustainable so that it's not just dropped as soon as the foreigners move on to other places? And how do we tap into that old knowledge that those communities have been using for centuries, for millennia, that are still using it? How do we integrate that knowledge into our newer Western sciences? After this semester, you may suspect that there's no easy answer to these questions, and you would be right. Or I should say the answer is easy. trust and open, ongoing, two-way conversation and communication in which we partner with each other, truly partner with each other, learn from each other, and co-create a process that is sustainable and ongoing and that uses all of the information, all of the knowledge, and all of the expertise that we have. That answer is easy, but the process is not. It's hard. It's not quick. It takes a very long time, and it can't be done part way. But again, the climate change crisis didn't spring from nowhere. It evolved over centuries of global action. We won't solve the climate crisis easily. We must work purposefully and collaboratively, globally, for the coming centuries. Every step we take gets us closer, even if we don't get to see the results of those steps in our lifetimes. But think back to that first coal-fired engine. They never got to see the sea levels rise. This is not going to be a quick process. Our assignments for this module include, first, our reading reflection. I want you to answer the following questions. First, describe how political worldview and climate change beliefs intersect with each other in the United States. So this will be looking at those first topic readings. And how has climate change, which is a scientific fact, become a matter of political opinion in public discourse? I would also like you to describe how social and cultural issues influence our understanding of and our response to climate change, and how is climate change, an environmental phenomenon, also a cultural and social phenomenon. And with all of these, of course, cite your authors appropriately so that I can know where you're pulling this information from and see your learning. Our second activity is to apply the terminology within a real-life scenario. I would like you to find a recent opinion piece. This can be a blog, TV, radio, YouTube, op-ed, etc., but a recent opinion piece in which someone expresses their opinions, their views on climate change. Respond to their major points knowledgeably and thoughtfully based on what you have learned in this class, and cite it appropriately. This is one of your fun things where you get to just not only respond, no, I think you're a stupid head and climate change is important, but use your knowledge and think about, like, what are exactly the issues that the person is talking about and what do you know about those issues. So the due date, once again, is going to be December 11th. I hope you enjoy this class. It's been really great having you this semester. I've really enjoyed reading your assignments, and let me know if you have any questions. I hope to talk to you soon.